In the mountains of central Afghanistan, there's a people whose faces don't match their neighbors. Sharper cheekbones, distinct East Asian features, a language full of Mongolian words that shouldn't exist this far west. For 800 years, one explanation has followed them everywhere: that they are the descendants of Genghis Khan's army. The soldiers he left behind when the largest empire in human history swept through these valleys. They call themselves the Hazara. Millions strong, they're one of Afghanistan's largest ethnic groups and one of its most persecuted. For centuries, they've stood out physically from the Pashtun, Tajik and Uzbek populations around them. And for centuries, that difference has cost them. The Genghis Khan legend explains their appearance. It doesn't explain the violence they've survived because of it. This is the story of a people who may carry the bloodline of the greatest conqueror in history and paid for it for 800 years. If you're into stories about the people history nearly erased, this channel is built for exactly that. Subscribe and let's get into who the Hazara really are. In 1221, an army arrived in Afghanistan that didn't just conquer, it erased. Genghis Khan's invasion of Central Asia in the early 13th century remains one of the most destructive military campaigns in recorded history. When the city of Bamiyan resisted, the same Bamiyan famous for its ancient Buddha statues, Genghis Khan's grandson was killed in the siege. The Mongol response was total. Chronicles describe the city and its population being annihilated so completely that the region became known afterward as shahr-e-gholghola, the city of screams. But conquest wasn't only destruction. Like most steppe empires, the Mongols also garrisoned territory they intended to hold, stationing soldiers and their families in strategic valleys across the region. Historical and linguistic evidence suggests the Hazara descend at least partly from these garrisons. Mongol and Turkic soldiers who settled into the Hazarajat highlands of central Afghanistan and never left. The name itself may support this. Hazara closely resembles the Mongolian and Persian word for thousand, hazar, believed by many historians to reference the Mongol military unit structure, where armies were organized into units of exactly 1,000 men. A garrison of 1,000 left behind, given a name that simply meant the thousand. Unlike the Kalash and their disputed Greek ancestry, the Hazara's case has something rarer: language that hasn't changed in 800 years. The Hazaragi language, the Hazara's traditional dialect, contains a substantial number of Mongolian loanwords absent from the Dari and Pashto spoken by neighboring Afghan populations. Vocabulary tied specifically to military and administrative terms. Exactly what you'd expect to survive from a garrisoning force rather than a purely local population. This is stronger direct evidence than exists for most other descendants of a famous conqueror legends. Genetic studies have added further support. Multiple research teams have found Y chromosome markers among Hazara populations consistent with Central and East Asian origin, at frequencies significantly higher than in surrounding Afghan ethnic groups. Some researchers have gone further. Identifying a specific genetic marker some scientists have controversially linked to a single dominant male lineage spreading rapidly across Asia in the centuries following the Mongol conquests. A pattern some have connected directly to Genghis Khan's documented practice of taking multiple wives and concubines across every territory his armies conquered. That specific claim remains debated in genetics literature. But the broader picture, that Hazara ancestry includes a real, substantial Mongol and Central Asian component layered onto the region's existing population, is about as well supported as any ancestry legend gets in Central Asia. Being descended from the world's most feared conqueror should have meant protection. For the Hazara, it meant the opposite. The Hazarajat, the mountainous central highlands the Hazara have called home for centuries, is some of the harshest, most isolated terrain in Afghanistan. Much like the Kalash valleys, this geography preserved a distinct culture and appearance for centuries simply by making the population difficult to reach and absorb. But isolation didn't mean safety. As Afghanistan's Pashtun-dominated state consolidated power in the 19th century, the Hazara became a specific target. Under Emir Abdur Rahman Khan in the 1890s, a brutal military campaign killed a significant portion of the Hazara population, and thousands more were sold into slavery or forced from their lands entirely. A campaign some historians now describe using the language of genocide. Land seized during this period was redistributed to Pashtun nomads, permanently altering the demographic map of central Afghanistan. Religion compounded the divide. Most Hazara are Shia Muslims, a minority sect in a majority Sunni country, adding sectarian hostility on top of ethnic and physical difference. That combination made the Hazara a repeated target well into the modern era, including under Taliban rule in the 1990s, when Hazara civilians were subjected to further massacres, and again in recent years, when Hazara communities and schools have been targeted in bombings claimed by extremist groups, specifically because of their ethnicity and faith. 800 years after their ancestors may have arrived as conquerors, their descendants have spent most of that history as one of the most persecuted populations in the region. Despite everything, the Hazara built one of Afghanistan's most literate, most urbanized, and most educationally ambitious communities. Facing generations of exclusion from land and power, many Hazara families pushed hard into education and urban professions as one of the few paths available to them. And Hazara communities in cities like Kabul and Mazar-e-Sharif today have some of the highest literacy and university attendance rates in the country, alongside a strong presence in fields like medicine, engineering, and the arts. Hazara musical and poetic traditions, along with distinct Nowruz and religious observances tied to their Shia faith, remain a vivid part of Afghan cultural life despite generations of pressure to assimilate or disappear. The community has also built a significant diaspora, particularly in Iran, Pakistan, and Australia, driven largely by decades of displacement. A global spread that means the story of Genghis Khan's possible descendants now stretches far beyond the mountains where that legend began. So did Genghis Khan's army really leave behind the ancestors of the Hazara? The evidence, the language, the genetics, the very name of the people makes this one of the stronger ancestry legends in the region, closer to confirmed than the disputed Greek descent claims of the Kalash or Nuristani. But whether or not that bloodline is real, it was never what defined the Hazara's survival. What defined it was 800 years of enduring exactly the kind of pressure that erases smaller populations entirely. Invasion, massacre, land seizure, religious persecution, and building, in spite of all of it, one of the most resilient and increasingly influential communities in Afghanistan today. Genghis Khan built an empire that didn't survive 2 centuries. The people who may descend from the soldiers he left behind are still here 800 years later. If you want more stories about the people history tried to erase and never quite finished the job on, subscribe and stay with us. There's more history waiting in the valleys the maps forgot.